Good morning, everybody, and welcome to webinar number 8, part of the network site visits, which is part of the demonstration network powered by Callahan Innovation. So thanks very much to everybody for joining us this morning. We've got plenty of people rejoining from previous webinars. Great to have you on, and a few new joiners as well. So for the new joiners, appreciate you coming on today. If you want a bit of a wider context around Industry 4, jump online to the industry4.govt website. We've got all our previous webinars there, give you some more wider context of where we've come from on all our webinars to date, and it covers a wide range of topics. So without further ado, this morning I'm going to give you a brief intro to the 3D printing world and integrated product life cycles, and then going to bring in our team at Longveld. So we've got James down there and Vitor down there, who are going to introduce themselves, introduce Longveld, and take us through their journey as part of 3D printing and agile product development. So we'll get the slides up, and without further ado, we'll get into it. So first things first, I'm going to give you an overview of where integrated product lifecycle sits within Industry 4. Then I'm going to take you through some examples with the help of Vitor and James, and then we're going to round off with some key take-homes and some of the upcoming events that we've got going on as well. So that's the structure of today's session. We've got Slido running as normal. So hashtag Industry4 on slido.com. That's where you can ask your questions live to myself, to Vitor, to James, who hopefully will be able to give you some greater insight if there's anything we've missed. And we've also tried to take on a lot of feedback from previous sessions as well around getting into a bit more detail of how it's happened, getting into some more real life examples, which I think James and Vitor have done a really good job of, from having a sneak preview at the content today. So let's get into it then. So where does it fit? Well, integrated product lifecycle is one of the three dimensions that sits within the process building block of Industry 4. So essentially, Industry 4, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this model now, broken down into those three key building blocks of process, technology, and organization. The integrated product lifecycle is the third part of that process element. So what does that actually mean? Well, what we're talking about there is the flow of information, the flow of data between the different points in a product lifecycle. So you notice that diagram on the screen there, that doesn't actually have any arrows on it around information flow, and that's because we can pretty much transfer data and information between any of those stages on that diagram, depending on the business, depending on the type of product and the industry. We might want to flow information from one of those areas to any of the others. Now, I've put up a few examples on the right-hand side there of the kind of things that we're going to be talking about today. Optimizing products, rapid prototyping, MVPs, all these kind of things that I'm sure you'll be familiar with. But what I do want to get across is that Vitor and James are also going to show some pretty ingenious and innovative ways that they've used 3D printing to really add value to the business. It's not just in that product design space. So that's a really good opportunity to talk to them. So that flow of data, that ability to be able to quickly iterate, that's all the things we're going to be touching on today. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Vitor and James into the discussion. And we'll get into it. So Vitor, James, will bring them up on screen, and if you could introduce yourselves, it'd be great to hear from you.
Hi, Frank. So quick introduction from us. I'm James, one of Frank's colleagues, work for Elmac Consulting. And I've been here with Vitor today, just finishing off the Industry 4 assessment that we've been running together. So really excited to be here for the webinar that we're running today. And I'll hand over.
Yeah, so I'm Vitor. I'm an engineering manager here at the Longveld. I have experience with design for 20 years or plus for now. And Longveld basically produces stainless steel products, tankers, tanks, and some other equipments. Yeah, so we are really excited to be here, and thank you all for attending.
Perfect. So the focus of this webinar is really sort of around 3D printing and how 3D printing sort of links in to what Longveld does. So as you heard from Longveld, it's around sort of stainless steel tank design and development.
Yeah.
Could you talk us about through some examples of what you build here at Longveld?
Yeah, so on these pictures you can see our farm vets. It's one of our products, but we also have some equipments like the tankers, Frontier tankers that everyone can see on the roads. So that it's Longveld design, and we manufacture every year those. And we have different other tanks for milk processing and food processing. And we are using creativity here to reinvent how we do things here. And 3D printing, it's helping us a lot with those challenges and make quicker design.
Excellent, thank you very much. So I always love it when I come on site and I can see a product that's familiar to me. So I can see it now.
Yep.
Every time I'm out on the road, I'll see another tanker that you guys have designed, which is brilliant. So love that, love that. So getting into the topic of the webinar, just really as a starter, could you talk us through what is 3D printing, what it is that it can do, why it's special, and maybe some of the limitations of 3D printing as well?
Yes. So 3D printing, they also call this additive manufacturing. Basically melts a filament of plastic and creates a part from layer by layer. So, and we also have some different other types of 3D printing, like one using laser. But as you can see on this video here, it's a filament 3D printing. It's basically it's melting a filament and layer by layer constructing a part. Those white parts are a water-soluble filament that has to support the part on space while printing, and that it's the software can help you to decide where to put those supports.
So just to understand that, that's sort of building up a support structure of something that's water soluble and printing the rest around it, so you can.
Yes, because that specific part, it's 3 spheres inside each other.
Oh wow!
And to be possible to print that, that has to be supported, right? So once it's finished, he's going to dip that underwater, and that actually takes longer than the video. It takes several hours to melt, to dissolve the material, but help us a lot to have a good final product.
Awesome. And what would you say some of the main benefits are of 3D printing, and what are the sort of limitations and drawbacks? Starting with benefits.
Yeah, so the benefits, I think it saves a lot of time on the design process. We can validate something before we actually print the part with the final material process. We use a lot for jigging and tooling supports here. Brilliant. But actually the creativity, it's the limitation. Okay. So every time when we discuss within the team here, we have some great new application that we could use. Oh, let's quickly 3D print that, will be way faster than actually send that part to be cut on the water jet or machine it.
So one of the main benefits is speed, and I
guess
speed, ability to create complex parts.
Yeah.
And are there any other limitations with 3D printing in general, things that it's not very good at?
Yeah, some limitations are the materials. So normally we use plastics. So with some applications that we need heat or more strength, we actually have to produce by a different way. But we could outsource from some other suppliers that could 3D print in titanium or stainless, even stainless.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you can see up there on the screen a couple of examples that I think you shared with me. So I was just going to ask on the back of this, how did you get into 3D printing, and how did it start here at Longveld?
Yeah. So I've been involved with 3D design for years for now. And I got very excited when I start seeing those affordable Chinese 3D printer. I'll say, okay, I would love to try one at home. So I bought to myself one 4 years ago, a Chinese one.
Your own personal 3D printer.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
my personal 3D printer.
Nice.
And they start printing stuff that I designed, or there are some sites that you can just download the files and print straight away.
Awesome.
And that gave me ability to start thinking about what else I could use in that.
Perfect. So some examples there of something that you printed at home for yourself.
Yeah, so that's a soap dispenser that I designed.
Nice.
And on the right, it's a vacuum adapter. I had a challenge to vacuum between the car seats. So I 3D printed that for.
Love it.
So that cost just $5 and solved my problem.
Can I buy one of those off you?
Yeah,
I
definitely.
need one of those. Great, thank you. And how did that then transfer into Longveld? So what was the next step around?
Yeah, so we start with one challenge here that on certain time we need to develop the walker.
Okay.
So it was on artwork that we were building here, and we had the model, but we couldn't flat the pattern to create. So I print at home in a scale model, so we could lay over the paper on that and reverse engineering to the actual size to cut through the water jet.
So I think we'll see, we've got a slide a little bit later on where we can show you the walker that Vitor's talking about. So we'll have a bit of a think about that. One of the things that you can see on your screen there, if you just pop back a couple of photos, I've actually got an image here, if you can see that.
Yeah.
So I can hold it up for you. So can you explain what this was and what it was for?
So we had a challenge a few years back about designing a new concept trailer.
Cool.
So that was a prototype. So we had some 3D sketches, but we start saying, oh, it would be better for us to 3D print that. So we could think about how to build it and also to present to the customer. And that was actually very helpful because everyone could understand better the shapes and how was the complexity. Actually,
it's quite good, actually. Yeah, all of the detail that's in there. You can get your hands on it and have a look. Brilliant.
Yeah, so with the 3D printer, people say, hey, actually, it's not that hard to build. And before, just with the 3D, people were saying, oh, actually, it's quite complex. How we're going to build that? That will cost 10 times more than the current trailer.
Perfect.
So it was very useful to have that. And now you can see the results. It's on the road.
Almost identical. Brilliant. Yep. Nice. See it through to fruition. Excellent. So some of the benefits of rapid prototyping there are around being able to demonstrate to the customer quickly, have a look at how to manufacture and think about the cost of manufacture, and how to really sort of get those quick benefits into prototyping and developing products. Excellent. So just on to the next slide. We've got a couple of examples here of some other items that you've 3D printed. So I know you were talking to me before around 3D models versus drawings and how best to utilize 3D models for complex shapes.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit around that for us?
Yeah, so those, once we have just one trailer to build, that allow us to bespoke all the main way parts. So those parts on the left in plastic, we 3D printed, we converge the design, we try actually on the trailer, and then we send for investment casting in stainless.
Right.
And this will allow us to make something cheaper. We didn't need tooling to create those model parts for the casting. So they can use the same process. They actually make a ceramic paint over and then melt the material. And then they use that for casting as a mold.
Great, that's awesome. And the main benefit of that is that you can do it quickly and you're able to create these very complex parts as you require them, test them, and then get them cast. And
without any tooling investment.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Great stuff, great stuff. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. This is a really ingenious way that you've used your 3D printer. And I think we'll see an example of the robot that you guys have implemented. Can you tell us a little bit around this robot, what you use it for, where it's come from, and then how you've enhanced the way it operates?
So last year we got a chance here to trial a robot through Callahan Innovation.
Brilliant.
And our idea is to use that for polishing. So we have a few tools that we use at the moment for polishing. And our team, they had an idea to 3D design and 3D print the adapter to use the robot to hold that tool.
Wow.
So that allow us to do the trial, and actually worked fine.
Brilliant.
So without need of machining and no cost, just several hours of printing, and those parts were ready for trial.
And how did the team think to use 3D printing for something like this? So optimizing your production processes by creating a specific tool holder.
Yes, definitely. And the great thing is that allows the whole team to change their mindset. So say, hey, actually we can give a better solution 3D printing. So we have some people in our team that 3D print even sheet metal folded parts to try, because it's easier to leave printing overnight than actually go through the whole process of cutting, folding, and then trying.
Brilliant.
So overnight they can have a part to try, and they can look, try, make sure, and they send a whole batch on the next day.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very, very exciting. Exciting. Yeah. So this was something that really sort of piqued my interest when I was here at Longveld, some of the creative ways that we're using the 3D printer, not just for prototyping parts, but for optimizing the way you do production, and really thinking about how creatively you could use the products. Okay, very exciting. Just up next, we've got an example of it's your agitator cap. So could you explain to us what that is and what it's for, and why this is an important step?
Yeah, so this is an agitator support. At the moment, we used to send the agitator outside of the farm vet. And that was damaging the agitator. And also, when they get on site, they had to adjust and install the gearbox. So this agitator support here allow us to transport the agitator blade inside the vet without rattling, and with the right settings on the height. So on site, they just need to remove this off and connect the agitator.
Brilliant.
So that it's saving time and make sure the agitator blade doesn't get damaged during the transport, with a solution that we can print in 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you come up with this as an idea or an opportunity for you and your customers?
Yes. So we listened to the customer, we understood the challenge, and with our open mindset, allow us to say, hey, we could 3D print something easily for you, instead of design something a little bit more complex that required machining or water jet. So that allow us to try easily and show the customer. And they say, hey, actually, let's do another iteration here on the design, because we have an extra idea here how to use this.
Okay.
So it's been great, yeah.
Excellent. So I think you mentioned that these parts you're going to be selling individually as well. So that's an opportunity to get that out to the customers too.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. And onto our next slide. It's a couple of other examples that I saw walking through the shop floor here. I thought the one on the left was a very cool way of using the 3D printer. Could you talk us through this and maybe some other examples that you have?
Yeah. So that emergency button protection was designed by Nathan here. One of our staff, they had built one using stainless steel rods.
Okay.
So it was quite labor costly, that part. And we say, oh, let's take the challenge to design something more elegant and cheaper to protect that emergency button, because that costs a lot. If they leave that swinging and that hits a beam, that damages and we have to replace, and that costs a lot of money.
Brilliant. I love the way you can apply 3D printing to health and safety initiatives, to production efficiency initiatives, to rapid prototyping and design of products. It's awesome, phenomenal. And how about this item that we can see over on the right-hand side of the screen?
Yeah, that's another product application that we sent to investment casting. the current design of those wing nuts, it's made by 3 parts. So it's a lot of labor consuming. They have to CNC machine the boss, weld the 2 rods, and then polish. So sending that for casting, they can just cast with the machine here with the mill, and then insert the boss. So that allow us to do not use labor for this type of component. It's basically a similar cost, but we can use our labor to actually put a tank together, not making components.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So a direct cost saving for the products that you're manufacturing.
Yes, and looks more elegant, right? The design. Yeah.
Excellent. Very, very cool too. Are there anything? Oh, go for it. Yeah.
All right, I've just you piqued my interest with a couple of those. I've been loving listening to you guys talk through some of those examples, and I think knowing that there's a few people on here that are familiar with 3D printing, and so I was, when I saw they were coming on, I was wondering what are they going to get out of today if they're already familiar. Well, I think you've done a really good job of bringing to life some of those other examples, where 3D printing can come into it, and everybody jumps straight to that rapid prototyping and the product development side of things, potentially being able to show customers, like you showed us with the model of the trailer. But yeah, you've gone well above and beyond that with your opportunities. I mean, I've got a couple of questions coming through, and I think this might be a difficult one, Vita, for you. We've got somebody asking whether we've got 3D printing examples in the healthcare industry, which I think is probably a challenging one, Vita. I don't suppose you've come across any of that in your time. It's not a problem if not, but I'm sure we can give some inspiration by what you've done today.
Yes, definitely. I never worked before in any healthcare design, but I'm pretty sure that everything related to that, it's possible to 3D print. You have different types of filaments, also flexible ones that you could use as that part of of a mask, for example, that it's in direct contact with a person, right? Some people are 3D printing casts, actually, like a honeycomb shape to hold the arm in that position while it's healing the bones.
And it's fully waterproof and submersible and things like that. Wow.
Yeah, and it's cheap. So they just scan the arm with a 3D scanner, optical or laser one, and they can 3D print overnight that cast.
So that's actually something that we haven't talked about yet. You guys here have a 3D scanner that you use as well?
Yes, we do have a 3D scanner here for some applications. So like we had this mixer blade here before, and the customer couldn't deliver us a few more for the other equipments. So what we did, we 3D scanned in-house. So after that, we tricked the model and we 3D printed the actual part for investment casting. So with that, we got back another part, a clone. So now we can 3D print and cast as many parts as we need without needing the supplier.
I think the important piece around 3D scanning and healthcare, it allows you to make very bespoke parts.
Yes.
So if you're able to 3D scan someone's foot or their part of their jaw and understand what that looks like, then you can print these very bespoke items in specialist sort of materials. So yeah, it's very cool. Good question.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. And Vita, I think you've done a great job of answering it, considering you're not not a healthcare professional. So yeah, really good. Obviously, you've obviously done plenty of research at home and been in and around 3D printing for a while now. So you've picked up on some of those things. But the one thing I really liked when you were just talking there around 3D scanning the parts, we come across every now and then pieces of equipment that are out of service, that no longer have spare parts on the shelf or even spare parts in New Zealand. So then we say, well, actually, especially with the COVID situation, we haven't got maybe there's some issues around supply chains getting parts into the country. So well, actually, let's take it on ourselves. What can we do to be able to react to that and get get a spare part constructed pretty quickly. And like you said, there's obviously a huge amounts of development these days around the materials that we can 3D print in. I mean, I've been engaged by lots of companies recently around the capabilities in terms of metal additive manufacturing and different alloys and so on, which is phenomenal, really, around to see what's now possible. So I suppose it's very similar in some senses to a lot of what we see in Industry 4 in general. The pace that this is moving at in terms of what was possible even 18 months ago, it's changed pretty dramatically. So it's always worth staying up to date with what's possible, because although you might have looked at it not too long ago and thought, okay, it's not for us, or it might be too expensive, it hasn't got the capability, it's quite likely that in a relatively short period of time, some of those barriers might have disappeared, and it might be possible to kind of have a look at some of those opportunities. So and I suppose that brings us on to a really interesting question, Vitor, for me, around investing in a 3D printer at Longveld. What was the procurement process, if you like, around deciding on what printer to use, what filaments are suitable? How did you go about doing all that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably a lot of people has that. So I had my experience before with a Chinese cheap model. So I start understanding how much it's a hassle to have a not good quality printer. Sometimes you can leave a part printing for 40 hours, and at the end that fails. So I start researching better about what are the professional grade 3D printers and good quality ones. That's why we acquired that Ultimate one. It's a very good one. It's very reliable. So most of the parts are printed well. So we have a very good success rate with that. And your question about the process, it's hard to justify sometimes before you actually get that, right? It's not just about a machine that you can produce some parts and have some savings. This machine allows us to go further, to understand what else we can change with creativity on our design and even the business, right? Because as you said, we can design a part to replace like a knob, but actually the business could be different. We could buy that 3D part and print in-house or in a printing service. So instead of someone sending that overseas, just something easily that we could print. so won't require any design skills to do that.
And it's really hard to quantify some of that stuff. So what I've been really impressed with here at Longveld is that creativity and mindset that Vitor's talked about. So having one on site and being able to use it and have some quick wins almost with Vitor as the expert has started changing the way people think. So it's that how do we utilize this resource that we have to make a significant difference in how we produce the parts or the parts that we're producing. So I think that mindset change based on having something on site here has been phenomenal. Very
definitely.
Cool, but really hard to justify the cost. So the return on investment relations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a challenge that you've clearly, taken with both hands around some of those ingenious solutions. And I suppose it helps with. I've got a question come in from Sergio. Good to have you on, Sergio. He said, does it give you a competitive advantage to beat competitors from lower cost labor countries? If somebody was looking externally for purchasing parts or any of the products that Longveld are making, do you think it gives you that edge around some of those pieces?
Sorry, I did not understood fully.
So if you think about some of your products that you export overseas, just having that edge over the competitors who may be based in some of these countries that you might send to, just being really agile and fast at Longveld around how you take that on, use the 3D printing, gives you an edge over your competition?
Yes, definitely it gives us that advantage on that design process and the validation of the product, and that help us a lot with the final customer and with the product.
How much do your customers value that ability to rapidly make changes and visualize for them?
I think they can see with a huge value, and they also can learn with us and along us, and they say, hey, let's do that with your 3D printing. Why not? Nice. So it's good how we spread that innovation along all the chain, right? So even some suppliers, they ask us, oh, would it be possible to 3D print this gear here that we broke from our equipment? I'll say, yeah, why not? That will take
service
no
to suppliers
time.
And customers. Brilliant.
Yep. Yeah, it's good.
Nice.
It's been fun.
Yeah, phenomenal, isn't it? Yeah. I think there's a real kind of, when you dig down into some of the principles there, it's quite interesting because Industry 4, we've talked about how it's changing, business models around moving from, supplying products to potentially supplying services. And I suppose it's not quite exactly the same in this case, but it's still that change in what you can offer without, going away from core business. So like you say, people coming to you and asking you just for, they actually want to come and talk to you around just 3D printing some things for them. Well, if that's the first thing that's putting Longveld in their mind, then that's obviously, got to be a positive thing around in the future. If there's any other work that he's doing around the core business, then they're much more likely to come to you if you've supported them with those things in the past. Especially, if it's big investments and big decisions that companies are trying to make, being able to visualize what that product's going to look like, just like you did with that trailer, is potentially what it would take to tip the balance around winning that work, I suppose. So that was I think that's a really interesting one. And the other point I suppose is worth bringing out is you've obviously done a lot of this in-house, Vitor. So you've obviously got skills and expertise over many years in 3D design, and therefore it's kind of been a natural transition, I suppose, for you to get into 3D printing. But I suppose for those that maybe don't have those skill sets in their business as a core, we don't have a design team that are very skilled at producing 3D models and so on. There's actually opportunities to still use 3D printing and get some of the advantages. There's companies out there that specialize in 3D printing and creating prototypes and small runs of bespoke products using 3D printing. And they'll obviously provide the design services alongside that. So even if I'm a business that's got none of those skills, I can still take some of the advantages away from it by going kind of external, if you like, and working with companies that specialize in this kind of thing. There's I suppose two sides to the coin there.
Yeah, definitely will be a challenge if they don't have the design capability in-house, but they could outsource someone from another different country and 3D print that in-house, right, to validate. So they can just send by email the 3D part, or if the part is an existing part, they could 3D print. But definitely if you have design capability, it makes easier to use the technology.
I think there's actually some trends going on that I've read about recently with buying equipment, and in an online, original equipment manufacturers will have downloadable 3D models of certain spare parts that you may want to 3D print on site to do your own repairs, rather than shipping a part that's worth a few dollars from one side of the world to the other. They actually say, right, in that we'll give you the 3D models online for you to download for your particular piece of equipment, and you can just go ahead and print them and use them. So I think that's something else I've seen recently as well, Vitor.
Yeah, and definitely this technology, it's been improved for years. We start having many 3D printers that printing titanium, stainless steel, and even robots that are 3D printing bridges, like one in Holland. So this technology will become cheaper and more available. So it's better for us to be on top of that to make the best use of that.
Absolutely.
So that's already happened. Yeah.
Awesome.
So something else.
So sorry, just back over to you, James. So I know you've got a couple of other questions you wanted to ask, so I'll hand back to you.
So there were just a couple of final questions. One thing that we talked Vitor talked a little bit about at the start was the art installations that you guys have worked through.
Yeah.
So I know if anybody else that's listening to this is based in Hamilton, there's a sculpture that you guys have put up there, and you've used 3D printing to
by the river,
implement that. Could you just quickly talk through that, or any other art installations that you?
Yes. So for art, what matters for the artist, it's how that looks, right? So it's very good to have that prototype on hand.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. So that's a beautiful photo. So we had that printed in half in scale to work around that. So that allowed the artist to work on those details as well. And at the same time, we were working how to build that, how to develop every surface to weld together. But that was a good challenge, how to make it. But printing allow us to think better about it. Sometimes when you have a CAD model and you rotate on the screen, you don't have much notions about curves, sizes, and complexity. And so it helps us a lot having the model.
Yeah, that blew my mind when I this is just down by the river in Hamilton. So that 3D printing was involved in developing these art installations. So you deal with all these curves and beautiful shapes and feed into how artists work. I thought that was amazing.
And that just improved the final product. And sometimes when you create something, you say, oh, I could be, this detail could be done better. But 3D printing, you can change before the final.
Yes.
So you have a better final result.
Beautiful. Yeah. Perfect. And then just sort of building on the question from Frank, is there any other advice that you have for people that might be watching who are thinking of getting into 3D printing? So one key point you mentioned earlier was don't buy a very cheap printer. That can be really frustrating.
Yes.
So do your research and understand
which printer you're going to buy. You have different ranges of 3D printing that use different filaments type, and that will inflict in costs, right? So if you are going to have a 3D printer that prints metal, the running costs are quite expensive. But you have to ask, oh, is this the right one for my business or not?
Okay.
So some other business, like even the prosthetics industry, they 3D print everything nowadays.
Okay. So another good healthcare example.
Yes.
So Frank talked a little bit earlier around having the right resource and skills to be able to use it, and potentially outsourcing to other people if required. Is there anything else that needs to be considered? How to get that mindset right around creatively using this new piece of equipment? So, for example, I know you guys had some quick wins when you first installed it, and you had your quick wins at home with cleaning in between your car seats. But do you think that's important, that change piece around how do we engage people with this new equipment that we have?
Yeah, so if people have the curiosity to learn, so have available many videos at YouTube with applications and how to do it. So it's easy to learn. They just need to start learning and doing.
Just start and do it.
And do
I love that.
Yeah, with a good one, a good printer.
Brilliant.
To avoid all that frustration of printing parts.
Brilliant. So that was the final question from me. Anything else from you, Frank?
Not really. Just sounds like Vitor, you've had obviously some frustrations in the past with previous pieces of kit. So it's nice that you can kind of hopefully transfer some of that experience to those that are listening today, to hopefully avoid some of that frustration for them. So that's really good to hear. So what I'll do, I think we'll just I'm just going to talk a little bit now about some of the upcoming events very briefly. We'll do some of the key take homes, and then we'll sign off, because I think we've really covered a lot of the topics. I mean, Slido's still open. If anybody else wants to put in any questions on Slido, #Industry4, feel free to do that while I talk through this. And I can put those to Vitor and or James at the end. But if not, we'll just finish off with some of those key points. So the upcoming events then. So I've just got a summary there. We've got Becca running their mobile showcase in Kaitaia on the 17th and 18th of May. So definitely get online if you're up in Northern and want to have a look at the mobile showcase, which is the tabletop factory with a robot that's moving chocolate and showing some of the Industry 4 technologies, as well as the ideas of digital twins and things like that. Definitely worth going to check that out. We're at face to face with D&H on the 21st of May, which we actually had the webinar with the team there very recently, talking about apps and no and low code solutions around being able to get some enterprise intelligence and automate some enterprise tasks, which would be very insightful. Feel free to jump on and register for that. And we've also got our next webinar lined up around agile supply chains and digital strategy. So quite a broad ranging webinar with Convita. So yeah, feel free to jump on and get signed up to some of those. I've got another question come through actually that I think is probably a very good one actually. Vitor, what is the average life expectancy of a good 3D printer? You know, the one, for example, that you've got in-house now, how long are you expecting that to perform for you?
I would say with no problems, at least 2 to 3 years, easy, using quite often. So if you don't use often, it will last longer, but it's basically low maintenance. You just need to make sure the rails has lubrication and no dust environment, and that will last longer, like a normal 2D printer, paper printer. It's basically a paper printer with some extra access.
Are there any parts
Okay.
that you could sustain so after 2 to 3 years, just swap over some of those parts that have been
Yes, and they're quite easy maintenance, like the nozzles.
Okay.
So like, for example, this one that we use here, you can change the complete nozzle as a cartridge. You don't require tools to change that. So you can have a spare on the side of the printer and just change the nozzle quite easily without any hassle.
Excellent.
Yeah, so it's easy.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I think that answers the other part of that question. Really, is that maintenance piece? You know, any specialist skills or any costs, I suppose, that people need to factor in. But it sounds like they're relatively simple to maintain and just about having a good environment to keep them in as well. So that's a really good question. Thanks for putting that one in, and a good answer, Vitor. So in that case, what I'll do is I'll pop the slides up and we'll just talk about our key take homes and wrap up the session. Oh, sorry, I've had one more question come through. Sorry. So we've sorry, Vitor. So we've got a question. You've mentioned some products you've made utilizing 3D printing. Have you managed to leverage the technology benefits above labor savings or indicative models? So I think what we're trying to say there is, has any of your 3D printing led to can you link it to a direct kind of cost saving in the business? I suppose it links to that return on investment piece we've been touching on. Is there anywhere in the business where you've been able to really kind of focus on or link it to that?
Yeah. So the ones that I can quickly think, it's the robot example, right? Because to make those adapter parts, that would take a lot of machining. So we're talking about 6 hours of machining a simple part. So that was 6 hours of savings plus material, was something that we left overnight printing. So the wing nuts was another example. Actually, the final cost, it's quite similar because we had to outsource the casting, but at the same time, that labor that we would be doing those parts, we're utilizing something better, that we add more value than a simple wing nut.
And would you have had to plan in time and capacity to develop those parts on your equipment here?
Yeah.
So now you can put it onto your 3D printer and you've increased the capacity that you have on the shop floor.
Yeah, definitely. And those parts are the other example. Even if we were just to cut the outer profile by a water jet, we need people handling to loading the material on the machine. It's the cutting time plus all the handling, and we actually have the parts straight from the 3D printer now.
Perfect. And do you think, thinking about the trailer, you said you were able to show the customer so you could optimize the design. Do you think that ability to engage early and demonstrate saved you in the long run?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
and that allow us to have a better final product as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people can actually see and use their perceptions to say, hey, actually this might be an issue. Let's improve the design before that actually happens.
Yeah, and that's another one that's hard to quantify, isn't it? That cost avoidance through some of this stuff.
It is. Yeah.
Great.
So coming through, so I appreciate for those of you that have put some good questions in there, and I think you've done a great job at answering those. So thank you very much, guys. So yeah, we'll wrap up. I'll get the slides back up, and we'll just wrap up with some of those key take homes from today to give everybody, I suppose, the last things to keep on your mind when you're leaving the webinar, I suppose. So we'll just jump onto those. So they're on the screen there. I'm not going to read them out word for word, but I think what the things that have jumped out to me in particular, that creativity and the ability to be able to adapt quickly and make use of everybody's skill set within the business to come up with ideas of around how we could make the most of this piece of equipment. You might buy it for one purpose where you've got a very specific outcome in mind, but then all those other ones that are giving added benefit is really advantageous as well. That ability to be able to visualize product for customers and for the team internally to be able to improve the actual end product was really valuable. So I think those were the two key ones for me. And I think for those thinking around the challenges that 3D printing might face, I would say that technology is getting better, it's getting cheaper, but also the availability of people to outsource these things to, whether that's just the 3D modeling and then you print in-house, or whether that's the whole process of modeling and printing, that can all be done by external partners as well. So it's have to have those skills in-house to be able to do it. So right, in that case, I'll hand back to Vita. James, just any final remarks from you to wrap up with, and we'll close off the webinar.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I encourage everyone to start using the technology if you're not, because you're going to start seeing the benefits of that. And it is fun to work with 3D printing. Yeah.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say thank you to Vitor for agreeing to take part in this webinar. You've answered those questions amazingly. And I also want to get a price for that vacuum cleaner attachment for my car. Definitely need that.
I will give that. Yeah.
Thank you.
That will cost around $4. Yeah.
$4. That's a good price. Where's the margin?
Yeah. Not much.
Beautiful.
There you go. So a little side hustle being started up from the garage by the sounds of it, Vitor. So that's good news. Right. Well, in that case, thank you very much to the guys at Longveld. Thanks, James, for joining. Really appreciate everybody coming online today and getting involved. We had plenty of feedback on the last webinar, which was some of it was really, really useful. So really encourage those constructive comments that were coming back around how we can make improvements, and hopefully some of you have seen those improvements in today's webinar. But obviously you'll receive the feedback link again to get involved and give us some feedback on today's webinar. Other than that, we'll close it off there and thank everybody for joining, and we'll see you again on the next webinar on the 1st of June with Convita. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.